Wonderful. Patrick, Diana, it's your show.
All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Finance Committee for the Akron Public Schools Board of Education for May 19th, 2021. Present with us today, we have board members Diana Autry and Valerie McKittrick. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Mr. Pendleton.
Thank you so much and welcome to this sunny afternoon Finance Committee meeting. Thanks for being flexible on the meeting dates. I think this worked out better on timing, both for the forecast and our legislative update. Legislative update, on Monday I was in Senate Finance Committee. Ryan, can you mute Mr. Rittenhouse? Okay, thank you. Monday I was in Senate Finance Committee debating, advocating for House Bill 110 to be adopted in its entirety. As you know, that's called the Fair School Funding Plan. And they are making the final determination before moving into what's called conference committee during the biennium budget process about whether or not to adopt all of the parts of the Fair School Funding Plan. My specific testimony was around success and wellness funds, which have been solely dedicated to education, but not included in the formula. It's been outside of the formula, outside of the forecast. We do a lot of accounting transfers at the end of the fiscal year, all school districts do, and it really isn't a transparent, accountable way. So I testified to that matter. A lot of the Republican caucus believe that those funds should be kept outside of the formula because they're more accountable. So you'll be hearing probably or have been reading about a lot of that debate. Obviously, there's report card legislation between House Bill 200 and Senate Bill 143. House Bill 200 is the one that's been created by educators. So there's a lot of conversation around education in this budget. That's a good thing. That's getting a lot of overdue attention on righting the accountability ship and the finance ship. So we have a few more weeks through the budget process and conference committee, so stay tuned for that. Any questions on the legislative overview?
Nope.
No. All right. Let's move on to the majority of the presentation today, and that's really ESSER and the 5-year forecast. Every time around this part of the year, we engage together in a conversation around the forecast. Obviously, this one's going to be a little different. The ESSER funds, obviously being the single biggest investment in public education ever from the federal government, is making huge tidal waves into all of the states. As you know, that's going to amount between $140 and $150 million over the next 3 years for Akron Public Schools. And when you put that into perspective to our $350 million annual budget, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of responsibility, and we need to navigate those funds appropriately. We're still very early on in this discussion. And so while all of you, me, the community is looking for guidance, this is the early stages of that guidance and planning. Your questions, though, today and leading in through next week and the coming months as this forecast takes shape will be very, very important. So I encourage you to do so anytime during committee, during board meeting, finance reports, and over the next few months. I encourage our bargaining groups to do that. COVID has been a difficult year for the bargaining groups to be a part of this process. However, I will make myself available virtually or in person, and on more than one occasion, I believe we need to do this. These are going to be substantial changes to the forecast. And as Valerie and I were talking, a great opportunity. So with that, I really want to get right into the forecast and have your questions drive. At your fingertips, though, in the board packet, you see the ESSER funds memo and the practical application guide. And hopefully you're seeing those on the screen now. Are you seeing a spreadsheet or are you seeing a Word document?
A document.
Document, great. So you see the practical application guide, the finance summary. It's just really important, and I see a couple board members in here, really important to keep a running tab of when we receive these monies, how we're spending these monies, so that we're very, very transparent. Does everybody see a large colored bar graph?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. We're going to start here. We're going to keep the numbers out of it as much as possible until the end. Hopefully this is going to make sense as we navigate this. This is our revenue. This is our annual general fund revenue. So what goes into that? And if you think about the forecast, and those of you who've seen the forecast, how do we receive money? Well, property tax, state aid, we have restricted aid, so that's like career tech monies or some of the success and wellness monies come in. We do get some tangible tax. So let's go through these just very quick. And it starts with 2018 to the far left side of that graph through 2025. Now that's the full 5-year forecast impact of what we're required to submit. We're currently right here in fiscal 21, about ready to wrap that up in a month and a half. The bottom charts, the bottom of the chart working up, the blue is our property tax. That's highlighted at the bottom in the blue. And if you look at that trend, it's fairly stable. We have a little bit of an increase. We can just isolate that for you if you want to see that separately. Tangible personal property tax, as you know, the law changed way, way back in 2005. And that's the residual amount of tangible tax that we're going to get from here on out. The green section is the largest percentage of our revenue, and that's our state unrestricted grants and aid. What that means is that's our state share. That's our state aid. And you can see the muted effect of COVID and the governor's budget cuts here as we were predicting increases in 2018, 19, 20, and 21. You can see the impact of COVID really muted that revenue growth. Coming out though, both as the governor's budget was proposed, the House budget, and hopefully out of the Senate here in the next few weeks, we will be restored to some revenue growth. But it's also time to pause and think, if we don't see revenue growth in our local property tax base, and that's accounting for some of that reappraisal growth, the only growth that we have in revenue is from the state, and that's somewhat limiting. Restricted grants and aid, that's just another way of saying career and technical funds are very specific state aid revenue that they direct. It generally doesn't grow like state aid, but it's calculated on the number of students that we have in certain programs. The purple section, property tax allocation, that's a reimbursement program from the state of Ohio. And then the brown section is all other revenues. You can see the impact of our investment earnings going forward here in that muted section. So not a lot of growth in revenue. On the expense side, I know it looks a little subtle, but it tells a big, big story. Back to 2018, so prior to COVID, so the 2017-18 school year, things are moving along quite well on the expense side. And as we look into 2019 and 2020, when COVID starts to hit, you can see our overall spend decrease significantly and now down to 2021. So let's look at 19, 20, and 21 specifically, okay? Let's tell the story. I guess before I do that though, let me remind you what these charts are. From the bottom up, the blue section is personnel. The orange section is retirement, insurance, and benefits. So that blue and orange section is the largest portion of our expenditures. That's salary and benefits. The green section is purchase service. So that's like our bus transportation contract with the outside contractor. But what makes up the majority of these funds, of these expenditures, is community charter open enrollment transfers. They're done through purchase service because in a sense, the state is saying, or our accounting system is saying, we are paying someone else to educate those students. That's already recorded as a purchase service. The red section is supplies and materials, and then there's capital and all other. So let's look at 2019, 2020, and 2021. As you can imagine, during normal times from 2018 to 2020, we would be steadily growing. Why are we steadily growing? Well, as we mentioned, the largest portion of our expenditures is salary and benefits, and those tend to grow on average anywhere between 2 and 4% when you look at salary, wage steps, and insurance increase, right? So those tend to grow along the lines with inflation, sometimes a little bit faster than inflation. That's not uncommon for a school district or service industry like we are. The purchase service section, though, look at the green between 2019, 20, and 21, and that's significant drop off. As you can imagine, when we're all virtual for part of 2020 and almost all of 2021, we're not transporting students. So that had a significant effect on our overall expenses. I'm going to give you some details at the end to give you the size and scope of this. Supplies and materials really dropped, right? From the purchase of buses to the purchase of Chromebooks to a lot of things were covered by ESSER, or we just didn't have them. So now how do we forecast moving forward coming out of a global pandemic and the single largest investment in public education ever? Well, we need to go back to some trend analysis with some walking around knowledge of, yes, we're going to turn back on this transportation contract and started to transport students. So you're going to see that purchase service line item grow between fiscal 21 and 22. And just a reminder, as of July 1, we're going to be in this 2022 fiscal year or the 21-22 school year. So we have to go back to some trend analysis. So when were we running at trend prior to COVID? We have to go all the way back to 2019, 2018 to see what those realistic trends were prior to the impact of this 2.5 year COVID impact. Now, that doesn't take into account ESSER funds. And that's where you're going to see some really big swings. So as you look out fiscal 22 through 25, the out years, the forecasted years, you see I've started to predict normal growth in expenses, pre-ESSER. I want to stress that, pre-ESSER funds. All right, any questions on expenditures? And then I'm going to go to the overall financials. Let's go to financials here for a second before we go to the numbers. This line represents 6.01 on the forecast. That's that fiscal health line. And it basically says, do you have a balanced budget? Are you adding to your cash reserves? Are you taking away from your cash reserves? Remember in fiscal 2018, 2019, our cash balance is going down. We're predicting even back to November of 2020 and May of 2020, we're predicting 2 years ago, a $15 million deficit. So we're spending $15 million more than we're bringing in, reducing our cash balance. And then ultimately, that's when we started to discuss operating levies. You see that we continue to try to trend and balance the budget. In 2018, we added $8 million to our cash reserves. We added $4 million in 2019, $5 million, and look what happens in fiscal 21. We added $30 million back to our cash reserves. So definitely a balanced budget will happen this year. All right, does everybody see what's called the Akron City School District May Forecast Simplified Financial Statement?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So this is the impact of where we are today. Fiscal 21, again, is that 2020-2021 school year. So that's coming to an end June 30th, and then we start fiscal 22, July 1. Our beginning cash balance was $67 million. We had annual revenues of about $350 million, and look what happened to our expenditures. And just to give you some detail here, the November forecast, so November of 2020, we were predicting expenses to be just under $350 million. Remember, for those of you who were paying attention to that revenue surplus line item there, the last forecast we had said minus $2 million, right? So big swing. And now it says $319 million on annual expenses with the ending cash balance of $97 million. So what happened? Somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million, I'm looking over at my notes on my other screen, were closed remote savings. So forget about ESSER funds. Somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15 million when this fiscal year is done, without any transfers of ESSER, we closed the books about $15 million under budget due to not being in person. Okay, $15 million under budget for not being in person. Add into that the impact of ESSER. And those ESSER funds, all of which are expenses during 2021 or the 2020-21 school year, qualified for ESSER funds because we were remote. So every overtime, every route that we did run in transportation, every administrator, every virtual teacher, every food service person, everyone that contributed their time qualified for these expenses. So you may or may not be asking a question of, well, why didn't you rebate more to fiscal 21? And now I want to walk you through some of the complications that we're discussing with our colleagues, the state auditor's office, and the Department of Education almost daily. Let me bring up a PowerPoint chart. Does everyone see the PowerPoint chart?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I needed to do this for me as a visual learner. To start to tell the story to ODE, tell the story to my staff, to our colleagues around the state of Ohio, about how significant these dollars are and what a great opportunity, but how hard it is to navigate. Okay, on the left side here, ESSER funds. ESSER 1, and I know there's different names to them, but for simplicity's sake, calling them ESSER 1, 2, and 3. 10 million, 43 million, and 96 million. Across the left to right, across the top of the chart, fiscal 21, 22, 23, and 24, because 24 is when ESSER 3 expires, when all these funds have to be spent, but not appropriated, spent. So 100% has to be spent by September of 2024. And kind of laying them out from left to right in fiscal years to give you a sense about how we might manage some of this money. But then we run into some issues. Down at the bottom left-hand part of the chart, you see fiscal 19 budget of 351. You see fiscal 20 budget of 345. Remember what, let's see, what my fiscal 19 budget was? That was 319 million. Remember that? So if we go back to this chart, 319 million, there's something called maintenance of effort. And maintenance of effort is a federal rule that basically says you can't spend less than 10% more than the prior fiscal year. Can't spend less than 10% more than the prior fiscal year. Why do they do that? Well, they want to make sure that you're spending money on kids, right? So this federal rule was created so that we wouldn't sacrifice dollars going into the classroom. You know, you could get one-time monies. Nothing like this was ever designed. We've had a call into Sherrod Brown's office about this. There's going to be future discussions regarding maintenance of effort. There's also something called maintenance of equity. And maintenance of equity is a per pupil level by all your buildings. and we haven't received the guidance yet. In fact, one of my staff members really teed that up for the state of Ohio, and read that maintenance of equity component, and it's a per pupil. So as you can imagine, maintenance of effort, you're maintaining a threshold of dollars going into the classroom. Maintenance of equity says you're going to do the same thing on a per pupil basis. Every kid in the school district, and every kid in the state of Ohio. Great rules for the basis of protecting dollars going to kids. Practical application was we don't know. We don't know what the impact is. So why did we stop at 29 million when we have at our disposal 140 million when everything qualified? Because we couldn't rebate any more to fiscal 21. Because in a sense, remember, $350 million, $35 million, we needed to leave ourselves some cushion there by, we spent 15 million less, remember, in general fund just for not being in person. We could only rebate a little bit of the ESSER funds to reach that maintenance of effort ceiling. That was something I've never experienced in my tenure and career. I don't think anybody has in the state of Ohio. I'm sure it wasn't designed to do that. All right, so let's go back to that chart and get a perspective, that PowerPoint, get a perspective of what this is going to do year over year. So we have 43 million in ESSER 2 in the middle of that chart. So what might that look like? So fiscal 22, 23, 24, maybe $10 million a year. We may front load it to spend more of ESSER 2 in the earlier years. $96 million is where things get a little complicated. So as you can imagine, if our annual budget's $342 million, and the two components of that spend right up above it say that there's $42 million, what happens? We've reached our maintenance of effort cap. We can't do that. Now, that's assuming that we're supplanting 100% of those funds, which we're not going to do, right? There's going to be additional programming, which I think is what we're all excited for. Additional technology delivering lower class sizes. We won't spend $42 million and supplant those dollars. But we won't create $42 million of new programs. Because we know, one, that's not sustainable, because you get out into year 2024, I want to go back to the forecast, 2025. So imagine fiscal 22, 23, and 24, this forecast that you're looking at now returns back to a normal budget. And I did that just, one, because I don't have a lot of confidence in how exactly and when we're going to use those monies. I know for what purposes. I know summer programming will be more robust. I know, generally speaking, we're going to add some money there. I don't know what the budget impact will be. So throughout the coming months, we will all have a better idea about. So can you imagine for a second if we added $30 million to our cash balance and I returned to normal budgeting in fiscal 22 without any ESSER rebates, what this cash balance could grow to? So could we look at another $30 million of supplant? It's definitely possible in 2022, 23, 24. All right, I'll take a pause, allow you to digest. Hopefully you have some questions. Let me stop sharing my screen for a second, just so I can see you all. Valerie, when we were talking, this is what I've been working on in the kind of monumental undertaking these funds are, from budgeting, reporting, transparency, federal rule navigating. This is a big task for us. I've left you all speechless.
So I'll jump in. Oh my goodness, that is a lot, and I'm so happy we have you, Ryan. I'm just so happy we have you.
Thank you.
So I guess just from the grassroots type of person who's, brand new to this. So is there going to probably be a large number of districts who reach this maintenance of effort due to the funds? And I mean, are they going to maybe explore some type of exception or something to that? I don't know, because so many districts are probably going to run into that. And like, is there some type of fine or something? Like, what happens if you, go above that ceiling? So those are just a few questions that I have.
Yes, I believe that we are all seeking solutions to the maintenance of effort. The last thing that we want to do is get to the end of the fiscal year following all the new programming. One, making sure it's sustainable. Two, making sure it fits within maintenance of effort. Three, we don't want to send money back. Right? That would be tragic to not be able to use those funds. The penalty, Ms. Autry, is the fact that we could have our general fund, our state aid, reduced by the amount above maintenance of equity, maintenance of effort. So there is a pretty serious fine penalty against that.
It seems, and I know you kind of mentioned this before, but there's really it's almost going to be a necessity over the next couple of months to continually adjust and bring back this 5-year forecast. It's going to need to be a June forecast and a July forecast and an August forecast. Yes. And then the other thing that was popping into my head, which is the obvious next question, of course, is the new programming that you're talking about. What is that? And how do we, and we're in such a unique position right now too, with changes in leadership and all of that coming. So, when can we expect some of those, the rollout of some of those thoughts or some of those efforts? And to your point, I would argue strongly too that we do need to be mindful about sustainability. There's nothing worse than being on, it's great to be on the front end of creating something new, but terrible to be on the back end of having to cut it because you can no longer sustain it. And I know we've talked a lot about academic recovery as being one of those first things that we're kind of doing even yet this summer. But I would also, someone was asking me the other day too, and I think you guys have received some of these same questions, better defining what that recovery is. Recovery from what? Where are we? And I know that's an instructional policy question, but obviously this kind of bleeds across all of our committees. So I'm sure there's more to be discussed there, but.
What would be helpful for you and the board in this presentation for next Monday? Something similar? Would you like more or less detail? What areas? I think, Patrick, you did mention something that we have to acknowledge, is that this is not the May forecast and then we'll update it in November. This is a month-to-month forecast. And as you hopefully picked up, I didn't compute ESSER impact into next fiscal year because I don't have the confidence to do that right now. But it is going to be more substantial. The cash balance is definitely going to grow, but we don't know to what magnitude.
And that's impacting your budgeting process right now, leading into this next fiscal year as well. So
that's right.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot. Like, I don't know how you're managing all that. I'm with Diana. I'm glad we have you.
Yeah, I'm glad I have myself.
The amount of information you provided to answer your question was really good. I thought the story you told was really good. But it does bring us right up to that cliff of, okay, what's next? Which which is what are we going to rebate these funds toward? How much of it is going to be supplant and how much of it is going to be something new? And when do we talk about that?
Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with Patrick. Your presentation, made it pretty clear, especially the discussion around maintenance of effort and equity. I think that kind of makes it clear. And when you end it with those ESSER funds, it really just brings it home how significant, it is. So I like the way you presented it.
Okay. So something similar to what we're doing. I'll highlight, I think we do need to say, and maybe David can speak to this during the presentation, or Ellen can, to the recovery components. I've seen, all the details of our plans. It's not really laid out yet. I think the goal, David said, is by the end of June, that there'll be a detailed plan out into the future, kind of incorporating that more into the budget in the future years. And then planning, budgeting, supplanting versus new. I'll add those into the presentation a little bit to clear those up. I'm looking back at my notes and we really hit that faster than I expected. Are you all surprised? Like, I still am, I go back and forth just personally as to what an impact and opportunity this is and how to navigate this just from the accounting perspective. Just behind the scenes book entry is something, maybe I'll ask Todd Atkins and the staff if they can prepare some notes, just in the number of transactions that we're completing to update the books. Is really an interesting process. But they're the ones that deserve all the credit because they're the ones navigating this behind the scenes. So with our annual audit, actually that's a good segue into that for a different topic. Our annual audit has been scheduled. Hopefully all of you can attend the post-audit. The audit is extremely clean, and I'd like to recognize my staff at a future board meeting, if that's okay with you all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Ryan, I had another question. I know we had talked about it before. Where are we at in terms of hiring additional accounting support for these funds? I know it's something we discussed previously.
Yes, I've been working with the operations staff to prioritize. So the academic side of the house, operations side of the house are prioritizing those needs to help manage and coordinate these funds. And I think you're either received or will be receiving a Dear Board Member letter on some of those. The number one priority is with HR to assist them in onboarding and recruiting. So that's the number one goal that we have all identified to help with all of the initiatives district-wide. So I think they're going to ask for 2 additional ESSER-funded recruiter positions to help with the interviewing and onboarding of staff. We have talked about an ESSER coordinator. Of course, we want to bring in the new superintendent into that discussion. We've talked about additional technology staff. As you can imagine, the number of devices and technology. So like our TSSs or our support break fix staff members. So we'd like for some additional funds in our contracted service, how we bring in those staff. And we've asked for additional budget and maybe a project manager. So by project manager, somebody that can coordinate at the technology level, HR, finance, tech, academic, and coordinate the volume there, not only with just finances, but a new module into HR software that might help us onboard people faster with Munis and those kind of things. those have all been prioritized, Diana, and I think the recruiters are going to be first. And I told them, or I kind of told the team, yes, I need some budget and support help, but frankly, I don't want to onboard somebody now when we're trying to close the books. I'd rather do that probably in July and August. So that's why you're not seeing those right away. And hopefully those get delivered also with an overall bigger plan and strategy document.
So to Diana's question too, oh, I'm sorry, Diana.
No, thank you. That was it.
Yeah, okay.
Are those time-limited grant-funded positions? Is that how they'll be hired and advertised?
That would be my recommendation, yes, because it answers a couple questions. It answers the sustainability question, which I think we did. But remember, ARA was $10 to $12 million in fiscal 2012. That still resulted in layoffs. Yeah, when you designate the position by ESSER funded, then you don't have a commitment to carry on that position afterwards. But if these funds were going to expire in a year, we still might do the exact same thing. But with 3 years, I think what the departments are hoping for, even though they need to return to some sense of normalcy when this is over, is that, let's just pick on me. If I get a budget person in here, maybe I can grow and develop a new budget person for somebody that leaves in my office. If I don't, unfortunately, I'm going to have to reduce a position. But that's something that it's a long enough runway, so to speak, that we can grow and develop our staff a little bit. So I believe, yes, we should designate them by ESSER funds so we don't overburden general fund. Good questions. Okay, we've covered a lot today. What other questions might you have? Or if you think of anything before Monday, I'll keep my presentation to 30 minutes or less. I don't like to have more than 3 or 4 really detailed slides. And I think we'll definitely set the stage for future forecast meetings, as Patrick mentioned, in the very near future.
No, but I was thinking when you were showing those slides, I don't have any other additional questions, but if you were to put the ESSER funds in the bar charts, the sort of the dramatic impact, that brown color, I think it was, or something that was other grant funds, because you're also largely showing here a general fund budget, but when you were showing the bar graphs, you were also showing other sources of funding, property taxes, tangible personal property, all of that. And then up at the top was the brown, and it was the, other, and I'm assuming that's where ESSER would be in that top.
No, ESSER is not going to come in on revenue. Good question. It's only going to come in through expense reduction. So it's sitting outside of our books in like a federal grant fund, but it's going to come in and supplant. So
we still show it though in our 5-year forecast so it's not going to show.
Not in revenue. It will only show an expense reduction.
Just an expense reduction, okay.
And if you've been hearing some of the nomenclature out there, people are worried about the fiscal 2025 spending cliff. So you're going to rebate, and then everything's going to come back all in 1 year, right? So we need to plan for it.
I mean, it's the equivalent of some off-balance sheet financing for, but
Yes. A lot to navigate.
Okay.
All right. Valerie, Diana, anything else for today? We finished early.
I'm still processing.
So am I.
I'm afraid to ask a question. You'll see just how little I understand all this. My depth of knowledge is I'm in the kiddie pool here.
I think we all are at this point.
I think we all are, including me.
No, good job.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Good job to the staff. I really want to recognize them. Super clean audit last year. They're on top of things. They're just.
And we always do. I mean, to that point, and we've recognized your staff before in front of the board. That is one thing that have always been proud of, that I think stands out even in the state. I mean, it's hard to get no findings, no material weaknesses, no audit adjustments, to get a clean audit and very few management letter comments or something like that that's extremely difficult, let alone on a budget this size.
I
So
worry about losing members of my staff all the time. I want to develop them and grow them, but I worry about losing them some days.
yeah. All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Good to
Thank
see
you, Ryan, for everything. And
Yes,
for
thank you,
everything.
Ryan, and your staff.
Yes, I'll spread the word. Thanks.
Mhm.
All right. Talk to you Monday.
All right, everyone.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
day.
Enjoy this beautiful day.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.